Welcome to our channel Legend Unraveled, the haven for classic film enthusiasts. Here, we dive into the captivating stories of the legends who shaped Hollywood and global cinema. If you want to discover secrets, anecdotes, and unforgettable moments from these icons, subscribe, like, and share to never miss the magic of the silver screen from days gone by. I remember going to see Enter the Dragon and telling Jerry Thorpe afterward, "Did you see that movie?" He replied, "No." I shot back, "Seriously? You absolutely have to watch it." I even made it mandatory viewing for the whole crew. Bruce Lee was on the verge of changing Hollywood forever. Then everything was ripped away from him. The premise of Kung Fu, that series about a wandering Shaolin monk in the American West, bore an uncanny resemblance to the concept he'd created, the warrior. Yet when the role came along, Bruce was passed over in favor of David Carradine, a white actor. Why? Carradine eventually admitted the truth, but few were willing to hear it. That rejection became the starkest example of Hollywood's prejudice against Bruce Lee. From his beginnings as Kato in The Green Hornet to his meteoric success in Hong Kong, Lee battled racial stereotypes, discrimination, and the theft of his ideas. But it was this lost opportunity that crystallized the obstacles he faced, foreshadowing his exile, his triumphs abroad, and the lasting impact of his fight for recognition. The role that should have been his. In the early 1970s, Hollywood stood on the brink of a cultural shift it didn't yet grasp. Martial arts films were flooding global markets from Hong Kong, bringing raw physicality and exoticism American audiences couldn't ignore. At the heart of this wave was a figure destined to shatter all barriers: Bruce Lee. He'd already left his mark on American television. In The Green Hornet, his character Kato stole scenes with lightning-fast moves, outshining even Van Williams. Even in brief appearances on Batman or Longstreet, his charisma was undeniable. Yet while his presence electrified viewers, producers didn't know how to use him. Too authentic, too intense, and above all too Chinese for an industry clinging to its established formulas. Behind the scenes, Bruce was relentless. He believed martial arts could be far more than a carnival act or action filler. A philosophy, a way of life, a cinematic art form in its own right. He wrote treatments, pitched concepts, and tried to reshape the system to his vision. His most ambitious project was titled The Warrior, the story of a Chinese martial artist journeying through the American West. Lee infused it with themes of alienation, survival, and immigrant experience, unprecedented for television networks. The studio's response was telling. They loved the concept but didn't believe audiences would accept an Asian lead. Meeting after meeting, Bruce heard the same refrain: "Brilliant idea, but America isn't ready." To him, those words were daggers. He had talent, charisma, a story to tell. Yet his race remained a wall Hollywood refused to tear down. Then came Kung Fu. The announcement felt like betrayal wrapped in irony. The series' pitch was eerily similar to Bruce's idea. A martial artist wandering the Old West, torn between two cultures, surviving through wit and combat skills. For those who knew Lee, the inspiration was obvious. Yet when the role of Kwai Chang Caine was cast, Bruce wasn't chosen. They went with David Carradine, an American actor. For Bruce Lee, this wasn't just a professional setback. It was the ultimate proof that Hollywood's biases ran deeper than he'd imagined. He'd poured heart and soul into convincing producers such a role wasn't just possible but necessary. And when they finally agreed to bring it to life, they erased him entirely. The pain cut deeper because the timing was catastrophic. Bruce was tirelessly working to build an identity beyond stuntman. He taught Jeet Kune Do to celebrities, wrote philosophical essays, dreamed of projects where martial arts transcended violence. Every rejection shoved him back into the box of exotic curiosity, a label he despised. Worse, rumors about his influence on Kung Fu circulated openly in Hollywood circles. Yet no one dared acknowledge it. The industry preferred casting a white man with taped eyelids over an authentic Asian. That decision sealed his departure for Hong Kong, where he'd revolutionized cinema, but it also carved a chasm between him and the system that had rejected him. This sidekick role could have been his ticket to stardom in America, the moment his talent would finally shine on a worthy platform. Instead, Bruce Lee became a powerless spectator, watching another man walk the path he'd forged. To Hollywood, it was a pragmatic business decision. To Bruce, it was definitive betrayal. Proof the system would never truly make space for him. Rather than surrender, he doubled down, choosing to return to Hong Kong where studios offered what Hollywood denied him: the leading role. This rejection wasn't just a matter of casting. It marked a cultural turning point, a revealing litmus test of the era's mindset, and the beginning of one of entertainment history's greatest what-ifs. The role of Kane would forever be linked to David Carradine. But lurking in the shadows of this decision was a haunting question. What would the series have become with Bruce Lee in the lead? Meanwhile, David Carradine unwittingly became the symbol of this Hollywood paradox. While Bruce Lee naturally embodied the essence of Kung Fu, Carradine emerged as the studio's preferred, safe candidate. A baffling choice, given he was an Asian, had no martial arts background, and bore no obvious connection to Shaolin lore. Yet, in the strange logic of 1970s Hollywood, he represented the risk-free bet. Carradine had been steeped in cinema since childhood. His father, John Carradine, was a towering figure in American film with his booming voice and commanding presence. David grew up roaming studio backlots, breathing in the scent of spotlights and scripts. This familiarity with the system gave him a decisive edge over Bruce Lee. He spoke the producer's language, understood their unspoken codes. Most crucially, he physically matched the all-American hero studio executives envisioned. Tall, blonde, with European features. But Carradine was more than a fortunate heir. By the early 70s, he'd already proven his acting versatility on stage and television. The producers of Kung Fu weren't seeking mere martial arts spectacle. They wanted a philosophical series, a slow meditation on identity, set against the mythic backdrop of the Old West. Carradine's introspective calm and enigmatic presence seemed tailor-made for this vision. Yet this reasoning had one glaring flaw. Carradine knew absolutely nothing about martial arts. Where Bruce Lee executed lightning-fast combinations with electric energy, Carradine had to learn everything from scratch. Producers dismissed this concern with a wave. They believed the average 1972 American viewer wouldn't distinguish authentic moves from choreographed approximations. Accessibility trumped authenticity. Carradine was chosen not for martial prowess, but for his ability to embody the archetype of a Western sage. Years later, Carradine would candidly admit his unease about the casting. "I wasn't a martial artist, but they wanted an actor, and I was an actor." This confession laid bare Hollywood's priorities. Appearance over reality, performance over lived experience. To prepare for his role as Kwai Chong Caine, a mixed-race monk wandering the American West, Carradine trained in martial arts basics under fight choreographers. He mastered minimalist stances and circular movements emphasizing grace over power. Where Bruce Lee would have brought vibrant intensity, Carradine cultivated an almost meditative approach. His gestures became slow, deliberate, suspended in time, a Western interpretation of Eastern wisdom that ironically captivated millions. This choice infuriated martial arts purists yet resonated deeply with producers. For Carradine, it was a career-defining turn. Overnight, he shed his status as a journeyman actor. He now anchored a groundbreaking series. Critics would later debate his suitability for the role, but one fact remained. Kung Fu thrust Carradine into the cultural spotlight, a position Bruce Lee, his eternal shadow rival, had dreamed of claiming in Hollywood's heart. Yet this ascent left a bitter aftertaste. It brutally eclipsed Lee, forcing him to watch helplessly as another man took the role he felt destined for. While Carradine quietly built his legacy through Caine, Lee's frustration hardened into fierce resolve. He became more determined than ever to forge his own path, to prove Hollywood had misjudged him. Behind the scenes, early 1970s Hollywood was in turmoil. Major studios panicked as audiences abandoned theaters for television screens, independent films, and rising countercultures. Westerns, those pillars of the American dream, were losing ground. Producers desperately sought renewal through an unprecedented blend of action, philosophy, and Oriental exoticism. Bruce Lee personified this promise flawlessly. He'd already electrified America as the valiant Kato in The Green Hornet, 1966 to 1967. Though the show lasted only one season, his magnetic charisma, blistering speed, and martial mastery left an indelible mark, a talent unmatched in the West. So why, when the role of Kwai Chang Caine in Kung Fu became available, did this obvious choice vanish? Why reject the man seemingly born to play a Shaolin monk adrift in the American West? The answer lies in Hollywood's deep-seated prejudices. In internal meetings, with remarks journalists would later expose, executives bluntly referenced the foreign problem. They believed American audiences, particularly in conservative regions, would never accept an Asian actor leading a primetime series. A cruel paradox. Lee was deemed too Chinese to portray a Chinese character. Behind this absurdity lurked icy financial calculations. Advertisers, television's invisible kings, feared an Asian star would alienate mainstream viewers. A white actor, even one exoticized through makeup or costume, represented a safer bet. David Carradine, with his angular face and enigmatic gaze, became the ideal compromise. Ethnic enough to evoke Oriental mystique yet sufficiently white to reassure investors. Casting directors saw perfect alchemy. A sterilized, fantasy monk stripped of authenticity. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers and ABC clashed. On one side, innovation's call, the 1970s saw bold series like Bridget Loves Bernie and M.S.H. On the other, visceral fear of failure. Despite his genius, Bruce Lee remained an untested lead. His thick accent worried producers who prized dialogue clarity over cultural truth. Lee himself would recount disastrous meetings to his wife Linda. "They don't grasp what I bring," he sighed. Producers wanted a walking cliché, a distant sage spouting cryptic maxims. He dreamed of infusing the character with raw vitality, contradictions, tangible humanity. Caine shouldn't be a proverb machine, he argued. But in Hollywood's cautious hands, nuance was deemed unnecessary risk. Behind these artistic choices lay deeper anxiety, an America wrestling with identity, torn between openness and retreat. 1970s America nursed a turbulent relationship with Asia, shaped by Cold War tremors. As Kung Fu entered development, the Vietnam War still raged. Nightly newscasts flooded homes with images of jungles ablaze, napalm strikes, and anti-war protests. This coverage forged a stereotypical vision of the Orient, simultaneously exotic and threatening. In this tense climate, a strong, unapologetic Chinese hero seemed politically risky for studios. Producers sought a sanitized Asia, mystical enough to transport viewers, yet diluted enough not to frighten them. David Carradine's Kwai Chang Caine fit this blueprint perfectly. His slow, measured movements, hesitant speech, and aura of unchanging wisdom offered a sterilized version of martial arts. Oriental philosophy filtered through the reassuring prism of a white body. When Carradine landed the role, it wasn't seen as boldness but safe compromise. Hailing from an acting dynasty, photogenic and already embedded in Hollywood circles, he embodied the studio's ideal solution. They could capitalize on Asian mystique without breaching the industry's entrenched racial barriers. Years later, critics would condemn this as one of American television's most blatant yellow-face cases. But at the time, this masquerade was sold as artistic revolution. While Carradine was praised for his quiet strength, few viewers sensed the void behind the facade. The man who'd truly brought Kung Fu to Hollywood was barred from the role meant to crown his career. For Bruce Lee, the casting news was a dagger to the heart. Friends described him pacing his apartment, fists clenched, voice trembling with suppressed rage. "They want the idea, the martial arts, the philosophy, but not me," he confided bitterly to Linda. His eyes burned with disbelief at the paradox. How could they claim his culture yet reject his identity? David Carradine, polite and reserved, perfectly embodied the Shaolin monk as producers imagined him. A contemplative, harmless figure dispensing proverbs in the American West. The polar opposite of Bruce Lee's electric vision. A combative, charismatic character blending physical explosiveness and philosophical depth. The wound cut deeper because Lee had co-developed The Warrior, a nearly identical project Warner Brothers ultimately buried. For months, he'd refined fight scenes, honed the protagonist, believing his moment had come. They think a white man can channel my essence better than I can, he raged to students. They don't understand it's not just about moves. It's an entire presence, an entire history. Tension between the two men simmered in Hollywood's shadows. A production assistant recalled a charged studio encounter. Lee, seething, froze upon seeing Carradine. Their gazes crossed swords before a curt nod, silent acknowledgement of a rivalry transcending mere artistic competition. This was now a battle for cultural legitimacy. Carradine, for his part, navigated between professional pressure and growing unease. Though audiences adored his performance, he knew full well that Lee should have played the role. Bruce was phenomenal, he would confess many years later. I had no business being in that series, but the executives decided. I just did my best. Meanwhile, each aired episode, each standing ovation for his rival, turned Lee's frustration into fuel. Sitting before his television, he watched what could have been his destiny unfold, and forged in the shadows the revenge that would shake global cinema. This defeat only sharpened Bruce Lee's resolve. I won't wait for them to give me what's mine, he declared, eyes blazing with fierce determination. He threw himself body and soul into perfecting his martial art, Jeet Kune Do, while weaving his web in Hong Kong cinema. Every punch, every choreographed fight scene became a manifesto. Hollywood had misjudged him, and he would prove